Welcome to our Marketing for Humans webinar series. I'm John Miller. I'm the head of Scribewise. The Marketing for Humans series is based upon the idea that the science and math tail is wagging the dog a little bit when it comes to business. Those things are important, but we've kind of gone a little bit too far in that direction, in our opinion. And we feel like we need to remember, especially as we've all been working from home, dealing with so much, that this is very much a time when we need to create human connections. So thank you again for joining us. At Scribewise, we call ourselves a brand dialogue agency, and that refers to the idea that there is a conversation that occurs around every brand. Sometimes it's very quiet, sometimes it's very loud, but it is a human-driven conversation. So our work involves helping clients tell their story, and then in an ongoing way, create content that forwards that story, create great content experiences, which is very design-oriented, and then distributes that content so that it gets to the right people at the right time in the right channel. So that brand dialogue is not just about marketing. It's also about your internal stakeholders, because the brand dialogue happens inside and outside. In the social media driven world, everybody who works at your company is a brand ambassador. And so we're excited to have Pete Van Neste from talent acquisition platform Pinpoint with us today. They're a recruitment software company, and they help companies find the right talent, retain the right talent, etc. Pete is an experienced marketing leader who specializes in helping B2B SaaS companies grow faster. He's a rich background. He's launched new products into global markets. He has owned the revenue number. He's built teams from scratch. He's even worked in sales. So at Pinpoint, they are a very fast growing company helping organizations, as I said, attract, hire, and retain the right talent. So this presentation from Pete today, I think, is very interesting and very contrarian. So I'm excited to hear it from that standpoint. And I think it's a wake-up call for all of us who work in both marketing and HR, because those two disciplines, I think, are closer together than ever before because of the aforementioned fact that everybody's a brand ambassador. So Pete, thank you so much for joining us. And one other logistics note, throughout the Marketing for Humans series, we've been raising money for charity. So today we're raising money for Pete's chosen charity, which is Girls Who Code. And we will put the link in. We would very much appreciate if you can make a donation to that, $5, $10, $25, whatever it will be. And Scribewise will be making a donation as well, at least matching whatever you all donate today. So Pete, that's enough of me blathering on. I yield the floor to you. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks very much, John. You can see my screen now.
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Excellent. So yeah, thanks very much for the introduction. I'm Pete. I'm the head of marketing at Pinpoint. Unlike the previous slide, told you that I'm the CMO of NAV something, I think. But yes, I am head of marketing at Pinpoint. And as John said, we build software that helps organizations to attract, hire, and retain more of the right people. I'm a marketer first and foremost, and my day-to-day is about helping Pinpoint to grow and attract customers and help those customers be more successful. But in that day-to-day, I'm exposed to the employer brands of hundreds of our customers all over the world, and kind of picked up a thing or two about employer branding along the way. I think we see the good, the bad, and some really ugly stuff going on in the process of helping organizations to deliver their employer brand. And we're doing that right now to about 500,000 candidates each month. And so whilst I'm not an employer branding consultant, I've come into the industry without any kind of preconceived ideas. I've seen some of what works, some of what doesn't. And really, that's what I'm going to try and share with you today. So over the next 20 minutes or so, we're going to look at a bunch of things. We'll talk about what makes a successful employer brand, how to develop an effective employee value proposition. And then I'll just share some examples and quick wins of ways that we've seen organizations put some basic best practice into play in terms of their recruitment marketing and how they're positioning themselves as an employer brand in the market. And really, we see that a single good hire would have a bigger impact on your business than the biggest deal that you closed last month, right? You could hire one great sales rep and they're going to close a great deal every month. You can hire one great engineer and they're going to build a feature that's loved by hundreds or thousands of your customers. But most organizations that we work with, at least in the early days, don't celebrate hiring a really great person in the same way that they celebrate winning that massive deal. And they don't really put as much thought into it either, right? Like if your marketing team was pitching for another $100,000, you'd be putting days into how you're going to spend that, who you're going to work with, who are the vendors you're going to choose to spend that with, how are you going to measure the ROI? But we take an hour to throw up a job ad for a 100K a year role based on a job description that we've copied from 3 places on the internet and kind of hashed together. And I've certainly made more than my fair share of bad hires in previous businesses. And without exception, I think that's been when there's been some desperation, either on my part or on the part of the team. Oftentimes we're stretched, we're trying to hire people quickly. And really for every sort of quote unquote bad hire that I've made in the past, I've always had some kind of niggle during the interview process that something's maybe not quite right. But I've gone ahead and really sold the candidate on the opportunity anyway, and kind of done my best to hide anything from them that could potentially make them turn down the offer if we decided to make it. And I think each time I've had somebody not work out, that's been not because they couldn't do the job, but because what we were promising them as an environment and as a role isn't actually what we delivered. And really that's my fault for not being honest up front, right? And I think each time the disruption to the business was bigger than if we hadn't made that hire, because we'd waited time to recruit the person, to onboard the person, to train them, to introduce them to clients, to introduce them to the team. But each time we were kind of back to square one, either we'd asked that person to leave or they'd left of their own accord. But all that said, like, what does this have to do with employer brand? Well, we kind of at Pinpoint see an employer brand as something that isn't about attracting more candidates. It's about attracting the right candidates and repelling the wrong ones. And so it's a little bit like marketing, right? What we want to do is to fill the sales funnel with quality leads that A, sales can close, but B, are going to turn into customers that are successful for our business, and they're going to become sort of loyal advocates for our brand, and they're going to go on to refer their friends to us and speak positively of us in the market. Whereas if what we do is we sell to customers that are a bad fit, they're going to speak negatively of us in the market, not necessarily because what we have to offer is bad, but because they weren't the right fit for our solution. And the idea is that by getting our employer brand right, we're going to get more opportunities to meet the right candidates, and we're going to spend less time having to manage the huge volume of applicants from ones that aren't a great fit. And in the process, hopefully, we will find that less often we feel pushed into that corner to have to settle for a sort of second best candidate. And conscious, I'm speaking to a bunch of marketers right now, and I won't dwell on this, but just to be clear about what we're talking about in terms of definitions here, there's like the employer branding, which is kind of the physical manifestation of the brand, if you like. So it's the career site, the colors, it's the photography, it's what you include in your swag bag at the careers fair, it's, you know, the contents of job ads. And then there's the brand. So it's, you know, the reputation of your company as an employer, right? Both internally with your own team and externally in the market. And that comes down to how you actually deliver on your brand. Like, are you living up to the promises that you're making? What's it actually like to work day to day in your organization? How do you treat candidates? How do you treat your team? And really, these two are intrinsically linked, right? The branding affects your reputation, especially externally. But the brand has to deliver on the promises, or you quickly destroy your reputation in the market. We want the promises that we make to be true, so that those people that join our team feel that they can get behind that brand and become advocates for that brand back into the market. And that really takes me on to the kind of biggest mistake that we see organizations making when they're struggling to hire people, especially fast and especially in a candidate-driven market. And that is that they set out to find more candidates. And in doing so, they oftentimes sort of start to hide the truth about what it's really like to work at their organization, because they want to be as attractive to as broad of an audience as they can. They assume that if they can meet more people, they're eventually going to find somebody that fits. And they do what on the surface to us marketers might seem like all of the right things. And I kind of liken this to when perhaps we haven't, hit our like lead gen number for the month, and suddenly we throw away all of those things about who our target audience are and who we really want to attract in order to get a few extra, MQLs or SQLs or SQOs or whatever it is you're measuring through the door in order to hit that number. And what these teams do is they go back and they make sure their comp's competitive, and they update their careers site, and they rewrite their job descriptions to sound more appealing, and they invest more in advertising and update their Instagram photos and all of those good things. And more often than not, they do start to attract more candidates. But it's all about volume and not quality, and hiring managers end up rejecting the candidates. The best candidates aren't bought in to the business, and they oftentimes will reject the offers. And the candidates that do get through and get hired oftentimes aren't making it, to 6 months or 12 months. And really, this is all about goal setting, right? So what we're not trying to do is attract more candidates. We want to focus all of our attention on attracting that smaller handful of candidates that are exactly the right ones, because it's those right candidates that are going to be bought into your mission, to what you actually have on offer, and are more likely to accept your offers and more likely to be successful if they're hired. So how do we make sure that the employer brand and what we're putting out into the market is designed in a way that is going to attract the right candidates to us? And the foundation of this really is our employee value proposition. So your employer brand is communicated through this, but developing your EVP is really an important part of the process of understanding what's going to resonate with your ideal employees, and as a result, your ideal candidates. It's that kind of intersection between what you can offer as a business and what those employees really want. And I think a lot of organizations have worked to develop their EVP, but oftentimes what we're seeing is that they're focused on quite transactional things. So it's like, we want your skills and your experience and your time, and in exchange, we're going to give you this list of benefits. And these EVPs are also typically designed to be quite broad. So they're an organization-wide EVP, and they're designed to try and be appealing to as broad a range of candidates as possible. And the result of this is sort of inevitable. Like, as we know in marketing, when we niche down and we niche down the message for different audiences, we get better results. And organizations that are trying to differentiate on things like paid time off and flexible working and a great work environment, those things are now table stakes to good candidates. And somebody can always offer $1 more. Someone can always offer a couple of extra days of paid time off, or a bigger ping pong table in the office, or whatever it is. And if you play that same game, you're pretty much guaranteed to lose. Like, I can think of one example of an organization that we've helped where they were losing employees to competitors who would pay $1 more an hour. So they would then up their salary by $1, and then another competitor would compete on $1 more. And they were literally just like hemorrhaging their staff, and huge turnover there. But if you can take the steps that I'm going to kind of run through over the next 10 minutes or so, you should be able to massively increase your chances of attracting, hiring, and then retaining the right people, because they're getting on board with your organization for the right reasons. It's not just because you're offering an extra $1 an hour, or you're offering some other like perk that somebody else can easily outcompete you on. And as a reminder, like, the point here isn't that we're trying to get everybody to apply. We're trying to attract that tiny handful of candidates that are going to be successful in our specific context, in our specific organization. And really, we want the others to run away as fast as possible. So what's the solution? Well, we need to differentiate on something that nobody else can copy, and that the good candidates actually care about. And we know that more than anything, the best candidates want to know whether they can be successful in your organization. Like, you want to hire people that want to be successful in your team. And so we need to help them to understand whether they can be successful in your team. And we see the best way to do this is just to tell the truth about what working in your organization is like, and to do that through the EVP. And in doing all of this, really, our objective is to get candidates to qualify themselves in or out of the process. And I've stolen this from a Tim Ferriss book. But what we want them to do is basically go, hell yeah, this is for me, exactly what I want. Or no, there is no way this opportunity is the right thing for me. What we're trying to do is not have candidates on the fence who are applying and they'll sort of take the job if they get it, but they're not that fussed. Like, we want those people that are all in on our organization to be applying. And this can seem risky. I promise you it isn't. You want to reduce the risk of those bad fit candidates getting hired. And so the sooner we can qualify them out, ideally before they even apply, the better. You're then going to be able to focus your time on the candidates that are a good fit for your organization, give them more time, and end up making a better hiring decision. And so the way that we think about presenting this is still in terms of, what the employees are going to give to the organization and what they get back. But instead of thinking about this transactionally like we did in the past, like, we pay you money for your hard work, we focus on what it's like to work in the organization. And in doing so, what we do is we signpost the right people who are going to do well in our particular environment towards us, and we put the rest of them off. And because this version of our EVP is based on what it's actually like to work in our organization and our culture and how we approach things, it's much, much easier to differentiate against our competitors, because we're differentiating on something that's like impossible to replicate, really. It's not a standard benefit, it's unique to our organization. So some examples of this in practice, right? Like, each of these two paragraphs are going to be very attractive to some people and very unattractive to others. They both tell the truth about the hard stuff of working as part of this made-up organization, but they also communicate something around the benefits and the culture and what it's actually like to work there. And I think when we do this and we just think about, like, if all of our messaging was focused on the good stuff, there's just no way our candidate's going to buy it. Like, when you go and research a product and you read the product description and the description's super, super positive and all of the reviews are amazing and they've been carefully curated by the marketing team, you go on Trustpilot, you go on review sites, and you go and learn about some of the negative stuff and kind of build your own picture and make your own assumptions. But if we can talk about both the good stuff and the hard stuff, we own that narrative and we reduce the risk of candidates going and kind of making up their own wrong assumptions based on a couple of bad Glassdoor reviews or a disgruntled ex-employee. So taking each of these in turn, the first one, if you're working super hard, but you're falling behind because there's so much to do, the whole team will be there with you at midnight, making sure we ship on time. And so this says something about our culture that's positive, which is like, you're going to have a team that are behind you, we're going to work hard together. But on the flip side, you're going to be expected to help your teammates when they're stuck at midnight. And there's a good chance that you are going to have to work till midnight now and then when we're up against it, right? And that's going to be attractive to some people and unattractive to others. The second one, it'll be the first time anyone here has done anything you're going to do. So you won't have a manager to rely on that can give you the answers. But if you're a self-starter that can learn quickly, you're going to leave here with a compelling story to tell about how you made a huge impact on a high-growth business, no matter what you choose to do next. And to some people, again, that's going to be hugely attractive. And that's not dissimilar to what we're like at Pinpoint, right? Like, we are 20 people, we're a bootstrapped software business. A lot of what we're doing, it's the first time that anyone in the team's done it. And so people have to be proactive. They have to go and figure stuff out for themselves. And there isn't someone telling them what to do. But equally, if you come and join this team, no matter what you do next, you're going to have a really good story to tell your next employer, or you're going to have this great bunch of skills that you've learned in your time here that you're going to be able to apply to a business that you start for yourself or whatever it is you decide to move on to next. And so hopefully this has been helpful in terms of the reasoning behind why we would encourage you to be incredibly honest about the good and bad in your organization. And hopefully that's given you some ideas about how you might approach that. I did promise to share some practical examples of things that we could be doing from a kind of recruitment marketing perspective or a content perspective to make sure that we are attracting the right candidates and then getting them on the journey towards being hired. And so for the next couple of minutes, I've got some examples to share with you of ways in which you can better communicate this stuff with candidates. I think it doesn't really have to be complex, and there's a bunch of easy stuff to do to get started. But the biggest thing that we've seen, and I would encourage you to do really, is to ungate as much content up front as you possibly can. Like, candidates shouldn't have to apply in order to find out basic information about the team, like who's their hiring manager going to be, what's the salary going to be, you know, where are they going to work, what does flexibility really look like in the organization, what's the culture like, who are my team? Like, these things are things that we should be providing to candidates up front without them having to ask and without them having to apply and you review their application, because that's potentially a massive waste of time for both parties. So what do candidates want to know? They want to know what it's really like to work in your organization, that version of your organization without those rose-tinted glasses on, without the sort of curated Instagram feed. They want to know the truth of it. They want to know whether they have what it takes to be successful in your organization. And we've said this already, like, the best candidates want to be successful, so help them understand whether they can be. They do want to know that their baseline needs are met. So those sort of basic things that we used to call benefits, like competitive salary and paid time off and flexible working and things like that. And they also want to know what the recruitment process is going to be like. So as part of our software at Pinpoint, we have a careers site builder and a content management system that our customers use to manage their career sites. We've built a bunch of features into those career sites to kind of automate a lot of this content distribution into the right places for them. And I've got some stats to share with you and some examples so that you can see what kind of impact this has. So something that we introduced last year, I think, was hiring manager profiles on every job ad. So every time you post a new job ad to your careers site, we encourage our customers to select who the hiring manager is going to be. And that automatically pulls in the hiring manager profile that candidates can click through to and learn more about their direct future line manager. Candidates want to know who they're going to be working with, and who they're going to be working with, who their direct manager is going to affect their employment experience, like far more than the values of the organization or the mission of the organization. Like, their day-to-day is dictated by their immediate team. They're going to find this information, so why not provide it up front? And in support of that, candidates that view that hiring manager profile are 62% more likely to apply for the role. I was at an event last week where this stat was shared with me, that 40% of candidates say not knowing what to expect is the worst part of a job interview. And this is supported by our own experiences of building career sites and building candidate experiences for our customers. Again, last year, we started surfacing the recruitment process timeline on the bottom of every job ad, showing candidates exactly what to expect, how many stages there are, how long each stage is going to take, what they're going to need to do, what they're going to need to deliver as part of that process. And frankly, when we launched this, it wasn't based on any particular data. It was based on some feedback from some customers, and I thought it was a bit of a gimmick. But in my last round of recruiting for the marketing team here at Pinpoint, 3 of my top 5 candidates said in their first phone screen interview that if we hadn't surfaced this hiring process, they wouldn't have applied for the role. And those were all passive candidates. So they weren't actively looking for a job. They saw our ad. I think most of them saw it on LinkedIn. They clicked through, they were intrigued enough. And then when they saw what the process was, they decided it wasn't too onerous, it made sense to them, and that they were therefore willing to apply for the role. And we were able to make a hire out of that pool. And I keep talking about job ads. And I think we see job ads on a career site very much as job ads and not job descriptions, right? Like, you might need to produce a job description to satisfy HR. You might need it to help you decide how you're going to assess candidates, or to get budget sign-offs, or to figure out exactly who it is you want to hire. But a long list of requirements for a role isn't going to help you to attract good candidates. Like, we want to make this more like a product description, right? We want to put some marketing into it. We want to put some thought into it. And we see some really crazy things here, like job descriptions requiring 10 years of experience in social media, including, you know, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. And like some of these platforms haven't been around even that long. And so, yeah, if we can start to think of our job ads as ads, like we would write a product description, that's going to help us to sell our roles better. But this isn't about overselling. We still need to bring in all of those things we've talked about, the sort of the give and the get and the good stuff and the hard stuff, right? And here is just an example of a job ad that we've been running for Pinpoint. This is the first paragraph of the ad effectively. And instead of us writing about who we are as an organization and who we're looking to hire, we start off with, want your calendar to look like this with 0 outbound prospecting, and then a picture of one of our sales team's calendars. So right now we have a challenge where we have more inbound lead volume than our sales team can do a really great job of selling to. And so we're hiring quite aggressively to grow our sales team. And the types of salespeople we're trying to attract are those that want those inbound leads and want their calendars to basically be filled by marketing rather than doing outbound prospecting. And so top of the ad, this is what we're selling. We're trying to qualify in those people who want that, and we're trying to qualify out those that want to do their own prospecting and kind of build their own book of business that way. Hopefully that's been useful. I think one final thing to think about in terms of career sites, really, and that's about promoting micro brands. So just like in marketing, when we're promoting a product or a service, we tweak our messaging for different audiences. And this isn't disingenuous and it's not lying. Like, we're telling the truth about the product or the service that we're offering. We're just tweaking how we position that slightly to different cohorts of people. And it's the same for recruiting, right? And I think like Trulia do a great job of this. They've produced little mini employer brand videos for each of the teams within their organization. And it's just making sure that, again, we're personalizing this and that, you know, we're telling the story of each of those teams, not just something generic and kind of brand wide. And yeah, one final thing, the application process. So we still see a lot of organizations that require things like creating an account in order to apply for the role. We see organizations with huge long application forms. And even just a year ago, we were at an event where we discovered there was an organization requiring you to print, hand complete, and then mail back the application form. Like, in today's market, the best candidates have choice. And if your application process is long and complicated and barely works on mobile, they're going to go elsewhere. And that isn't just the bad candidates that aren't brought into your organization, right? Like, the good candidates are going to be put off by this too. And we have data that says you lose about half of your candidates if you make them create an account. And for every minute over 5 that it takes for them to apply for the role, you'll lose another 10%. So this is super, super important. I'll leave it there. I think whatever you do, please make sure that you follow through on the promises that you make in your recruitment advertising publicly, because it's only then that you're going to be able to build that kind of flywheel, just like in marketing, sales, and then customer experience. Like, we want those people to come in to be successful and then be advocates for your employer brand. This book, I highly recommend to you, Give and Get Employer Branding by Brian Adams and Charlotte Marshall. I've known Brian for years. He runs a employer branding agency called PH Creative. They're really well respected. They work globally. They've got offices in the UK, US, and they just opened out in APAC. Very much aligned with a lot of the stuff I've been talking about today. Their whole point around this is that you want your employer brand to repel the many and compel the few. If you want a copy of this book, drop me a message. My email's on the screen, or follow up with John afterwards. He can introduce us and I'll make sure to get a copy to you. I've got a stack of these on my desk. So with that, back over to John.
I'm actually going to jump in for Q&A. So if anyone has any questions, you can drop them in the Q&A. try to do that instead of the chat because it's just easier to keep track of. But I have a couple questions to start out with. So do you ever get pushback from people in HR leaders that may say that more candidates are key to hiring?
Yeah, I think it's an education piece. And yes, we do get that pushback initially. I think we have enough stories and we can introduce them to people that have been successful with this kind of approach, that we can kind of dispel that in the early stages. But yes, we do get that pushback. And oftentimes there'll be, in slightly larger organizations, there'll be like a dedicated talent acquisition or recruitment function. And maybe what they have to do is try this kind of approach with a small number of roles, prove out that it works with those smaller number of roles, and then begin to roll it out to the broader organization. I think like if that team can get a couple of hiring managers to buy in, that's super helpful. And those hiring managers then run with this slightly different approach. They see that being successful, and then that just makes it much easier to roll out. But I think you're totally right. There are still a lot of people who will be, we need candidate volume and then we're going to kind of choose from them. But I think like we speak to quite a few organizations, and we've worked with some who have taken that approach. And if you're not entirely honest with what you're looking for up front, like we've seen them bring in a good chunk of their market, especially in like smaller locations, into one job, basically. A good chunk of their entire potential candidate pool is applied to one role. They've rejected a good chunk of them. They haven't treated them particularly well. They've made one hire, and then in a month's time, they have to go out to market again, right? And they've burnt through their market in that first round of recruiting. They've not treated those candidates particularly well, and then they're kind of stuck going forward. And so, yeah, like it is a challenge, but I think if we can start small, prove it out, and then roll it out across the organization, that tends to work.
Yeah, that makes sense. So how do you juggle making application processes too easy and receiving maybe hundreds of applications, but not making them too difficult and turning off some strong applicants?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say I think it's a difficult balance, but I sort of don't. I think it's more important that we can get the right candidates in than, we make it so hard that the right candidates are put off, but we also put off the bad candidates, right? We like to make application processes as quick as possible. One thing that we do encourage, like especially if you're expecting large volumes of candidates, is to have some like pre-qualification questionnaires on the application form. So like oftentimes we see organizations where it's like upload your CV. Now copy paste chunks of your CV into these 30 different fields because our applicant tracking system or whatever tool we're using to manage that on the back end can't pass that information out of a CV and present it to us in a searchable format. Like number one, just don't do that. Use modern technology to help you. But then if you are still getting a high volume of candidates and you want to screen them quickly, like oftentimes there are pass fail things, right? Like maybe you're hiring an accountant and you can ask if they have the appropriate qualifications. Maybe there's a reason why you need a specific number of years of experience for an actual regulatory reason, not just because that's what you've randomly decided. And that would be a good pass fail question to ask on the application form. And then quickly on the back end, like if you're using an ATS like Pinpoint, you can filter your entire list of applicants, find all the people that answered no, and then either outright reject them or invite them to like a talent pool of people that you might consider hiring for other roles in the future.
Mm-hmm. Great. In thinking about kind of where employer brand crosses over with marketing, what are some of the ways that marketers can get involved with some of these hiring efforts?
Yeah, I think the employer branding and the recruitment marketing side of things isn't really that different to marketing and sales, right? Like it's about understanding the market. It's about positioning the opportunity right. It's about attracting the right people. And then it's about qualifying and effectively selling to them. But I think like perhaps we should be a little bit harsher in the recruiting side in terms of qualifying people out than maybe we are in traditional sales and marketing. But if we think about like the employer brand, really that employer brand is a part of your overall brand for your organization, right? And, you know, the advertising that you're doing for recruitment, and we see this, and like I'm based in Jersey in the Channel Islands, which is where Pinpoint was founded, and we're like a rock in the English Channel that's 9 miles by 5. Like it's a small market here. And we have customers that are advertising on Facebook and LinkedIn from a recruitment perspective, and they're running ads in exactly the same way that marketing would to acquire customers, right? So marketing can certainly help with that. But as they're pushing their employer brand out to market, that's helping the marketing lead gen effort for customers for the business, and vice versa, right? Because it's almost like free budget for the marketing team from a brand awareness perspective, because it is just your brand. It's just tailored to attract candidates rather than to attract customers.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, let's do one more.
Sure.
So when thinking about like ratings on Glassdoor, is it possible for an employer to maybe rebrand themselves if they have negative Glassdoor ratings, and how would they go about that?
Yeah, like I think Glassdoor is an interesting one, right? And often what we see is a whole bunch of just negativity, because people are more likely to write a review when they're incredibly upset than when they're incredibly happy, right? Or they're just on the fence. And there's a podcast episode with our CEO that I should remember the title of, and I don't, but maybe I'll share it with you afterwards, Cassie, and you can forward it on to people if they're interested, that talks about this in quite a lot of depth. But the idea is actually like those negative reviews are the real experiences, probably, of people that have worked in your organization in the past. And what we've seen work quite successfully is when they're actively managed. And so, for example, you might work in an organization where people are working very long hours, it's very difficult, it's very challenging. And maybe that's just for a period of time, but a couple of people have got upset, they've left, and they've left a negative review on Glassdoor. I think for someone senior in your organization, like your CEO, whatever, to be active on Glassdoor and going and actively replying to those and saying, hey, look, you know, we're a startup and there's only a small number of us and we're just on the way to raising some money right now, so things are a little bit tough. I hear what you're saying, like I understand your point of view. This is what we're doing to address it. But yes, I know right now this is our business. Hopefully in 3 months' time, things are going to look a bit different. And this is, you know, the benefits of that will come from the groundwork that we've laid in this more difficult time. Or, you know, I think there's something about being honest and true. There's no point in replying to that and saying, you know, you're talking nonsense. Nobody has to work hard here. Everyone goes home at 4 o'clock and we finish at 12 on a Friday. If that isn't the reality of your organization, because again, you'd rather a candidate know and expect to work long hours before they join than to join and be surprised by that, expecting something different, because they're not going to be successful. They're going to be unhappy. And like worst case, they're going to sit around being unproductive. Best case, they leave, but that's still leaving a gap in your organization, right?
Yeah. So kind of keeping that through line of honesty. Yeah. Great. I'm going to welcome John back now. He's going to start his video.
Oh, I think you're muted, John.
Thank you, Pete. That was great. Thanks, Cassie. Some of the folks who are attending, I'm sure, have seen our SEO delusion, which we basically say a parallel argument, which is that for most businesses, you don't need more customers. You don't need tens of thousands of people on your website. If you're selling socks, maybe you do, but you really need the right people and you need to give them the right experience when they get there. So this message certainly resonates with us from that standpoint. And one of the lines in the SEO delusion is something along the lines of, your mother was right. You don't need 1,000 friends. You just need a few good ones. And I think that that applies to recruiting people and building great teams and getting people who are all in. So, you know, I've never heard anyone in the HR recruitment space talk about it this way. So I very much appreciate this viewpoint, and I hope I'm sure our audience does. I'm sure they got a lot out of this. So thank you to everyone who has attended today's session. One more reminder, Cassie, if you could put that link in for Girls Who Code. We would love for you to make a donation, however small, to Girls Who Code, a great organization doing great things, and trying to lift people up and help them get into lines of work that, you know, historically have been closed off to them. So Pete, thank you again. Have a great day, and everybody else enjoy your day as well.
Thanks, John. Thanks, everyone.